3 words ended my marriage. Open relationship, she said, sitting across from me like we were discussing groceries. 10 years of my life gone in one Thursday night. I watched the woman I loved turn into a stranger right before my eyes, asking permission to betray me while expecting me to smile and accept it. She wanted freedom. I gave her divorce papers instead. She cried, begged, promised it was just an idea. Too late. What I didn't know then was that my worst night would become the door to everything I was meant to have. My name is Josh Miller. Until that Thursday, I was living what I thought was a simple, honest life. Connecticut suburbs, steady job, 10-year marriage to Dakota. Nothing flashy, nothing complicated, just the quiet satisfaction of building something real with someone you trusted completely. I'd wake up next to her, share coffee, discuss mundane things like grocery lists and weekend plans. It was ordinary in the best possible way. The kind of ordinary that makes you feel safe, grounded, like you've figured out this whole life thing. I was wrong about all of it. I was reading in the armchair, some thriller novel I can't even remember now. The soft sound of the TV in the living room creating that comfortable domestic soundtrack I'd grown to love. Dakota had been acting strange for weeks, but I'd chalked it up to work stress. She'd mentioned her new boss Mark a few times, always with an odd brightness in her voice that I'd stupidly ignored. That Thursday evening, she sat on the edge of the sofa across from me, not next to me like she usually did, across from me. The distance should have been my first warning. She was strangely electric, her fingers drumming against her thigh, adjusting her hands in her lap with the anxiety of someone about to confess to a minor crime. Her eyes wouldn't meet mine. They kept darting to the window, to the coffee table, anywhere but at the man she'd promised to love forever. "Josh, we need to talk," she began, and the tone wasn't conversational, it was a declaration. The air grew thick, suffocating. I felt my chest tighten before I even knew why. "About what, darling?" I closed the book, marking the page carefully, as if that small act of order could protect me from whatever chaos was about to unfold. If I had known that this was the last chapter of my life with her, I would have burned the book, torn it to pieces, thrown it against the wall. Anything but preserve that moment with such care. She took a deep breath, and I watched her chest rise and fall like she was preparing for battle. She let the sentence out as if it were a wrapped gift, as if she were doing me some kind of favor. "I've been thinking a lot about us. 10 years is a long time. I think we need a different touch." The phrase hung in the air like poison gas. A different touch. My stomach nodded, but I tried to stay calm, tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, even though every instinct in my body was screaming, "Danger!" I smiled, but the smile didn't reach my eyes. I could feel the fakeness of it stretching across my face like a mask. "Different how?" "A trip. We could go to the Carolinas. You've always wanted to see the sea in winter." I was grasping at straws, desperately trying to steer this conversation towards something salvageable, something that didn't end with my world imploding. She shook her head impatiently, and there was something almost cruel in the gesture, like I was being deliberately obtuse. "No, it's different in our dynamic. I read some articles, and look, the world has changed. Traditional marriage is limiting." She paused, and in that pause, I felt the ground start to crack beneath my feet. "I wanted us to consider having a..." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper, but the words still hit like a freight train. "Open relationship." The sound of those 3 words hit me like a gunshot to the chest. The shock was so physical that I felt my blood run cold, my hands go numb. My vision actually blurred for a second. For a moment, I thought I hadn't heard correctly, that my ears were playing tricks on me, that this was some kind of nightmare I was about to wake up from. The ironic smile I tried to force died on my lips, replaced by something between disbelief and disgust. "Are you kidding me, Dakota? What kind of tasteless joke is that?" My voice was low, dangerously controlled. "It's not a joke, Josh. It's about evolution. It's about not feeling guilty for exploring." That was enough. The rage, hot and corrosive, erupted. I stood up, my eyes fixed on hers. I didn't recognize her. The woman before me was a stranger, An imposter. You want an open relationship? Is that what you want? I stepped forward. Well, you're going to have it, but not an open relationship, Dakota. You're going to have the divorce papers on your desk tomorrow morning. She went pale, the shock finally hitting her. What? Josh, don't be ridiculous. You're exaggerating. Exaggerating? I laughed, a bitter, humorless laugh. The truth poured out of my mouth like acid. I married a woman, Dakota. I didn't marry a prostitute. The verbal slap hit her hard. Her eyes widened. How dare you call me that? I'm not a prostitute. I dare, I said without backing down, because that's what you're asking for. A license to sleep with other men while I pretend to be the modern, understanding husband. I'm married for love, for loyalty, and for exclusivity, not for a relay race of bodies. The discussion turned into a battleground. Dakota tried to argue using jargon about emotional connections and consensual non-monogamy, but I was deaf to her excuses. Listen carefully to what I'm going to say, I articulated, and my voice was the coldest I've ever used. I would much rather be separated than be betrayed. And yes, Dakota, what you're proposing is legalized betrayal, and I don't care about the pretty label you give it. I stared at her with contempt. Any form of relationship that goes against the standard of a healthy relationship, be it this abomination of open relationship, polyamory, or whatever, is to me something filthy, immoral, dirty, and disgusting. I would never accept such an abomination in a marriage that I took seriously. The determination in my voice shocked her even more than the initial insult. She realized I wasn't bluffing. Panic began to rise in her throat. She tried to back away, to argue that it was just an idea, that we could talk. No, I interrupted. Marriage isn't a testing ground. You crossed a line that can't be undone. You showed me who you are, a woman who values her lust more than her vows, and who tried to manipulate decency to avoid feeling guilty. We argued all night, shouting that rattled the windows, tears streaming down her face, while my eyes remained dry and cold, accusations flying back and forth like grenades. She called me rigid, old-fashioned, unable to grow. I called her a coward trying to dress up adultery in progressive language. She sobbed that I didn't understand modern relationships. I told her I understood betrayal just fine, and that's exactly what she was proposing. Around 3 a.m, she tried a different approach. She softened her voice, reached for my hand across the kitchen table where we'd shared 1,000 meals. I pulled away before she could touch me. The look of hurt on her face would have broken me yesterday. Tonight, it meant nothing. Josh, please, just think about it for a week. Don't make any rash decisions, she begged, her voice hoarse from crying. We can go to couples therapy. We can talk this through with a professional. There's nothing to think about, I said, my voice flat and dead. You want to sleep with your boss, Mark? That's what this is really about, isn't it? You've already picked him out. This whole open relationship pitch is just you trying to get my blessing for cheating. Her face went white. She didn't deny it. She couldn't. The guilt was written all over her expression, in the way her eyes went wide and then immediately looked away, in the way her mouth opened and closed without sound coming out. I thought so, I said quietly. The confirmation should have hurt more, but I was already numb. Get out of the kitchen. I don't want to look at you anymore tonight. I didn't sleep. She didn't sleep. I spent the night on the living room sofa, staring at the ceiling, feeling the whole house permeated with the acrid smell of our failure. Every creak of the floorboards from upstairs, where she was pacing in our bedroom, felt like another nail in the coffin of what we'd been. I was exhausted, hollowed out, but resolute. I was losing the woman I loved, or thought I loved, but reclaiming my own worth. And that, I realized as the first gray light of dawn crept through the windows, was worth everything. When the sun rose, casting long shadows across our living room that suddenly felt like a mausoleum, I had already done everything I had to do. I called my lawyer at 6 a.m, waking him up, not caring. Doug had been a friend since college. When I told him what happened, there was a long silence on the line. You're absolutely sure about this, Josh? He asked carefully. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I replied. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, like it belonged to someone else. Someone harder. Someone who'd learned that love without respect was just a pretty word for nothing. Then let's bury her, Doug said simply. I'll have the papers ready by noon. I took a cold shower, letting the icy water shock my system back to some semblance of feeling. I put on my best suit, the charcoal gray one Dakota had bought me for our 8th anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me. I knotted my tie with hands that didn't shake, even though inside I felt like I was coming apart. Before leaving, I stood outside the door to our bedroom, my hand on the doorknob. I could hear her breathing on the other side, that familiar rhythm I'd fallen asleep to for 10 years. I couldn't do it. I couldn't face her without feeling disgust and pity warring in my chest, and I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me struggle. I left the papers on the kitchen table, next to the coffee maker that was already set to brew at 7, like it did every morning. Some routines die hard. On top of the legal documents, I placed a single folded sheet of paper, my final letter. I didn't write it with love. I wrote it with the cold precision of a man closing a business deal gone bad. Dakota, this is the one and only communication we will have without the presence of third parties. I am ending this relationship immediately. From this moment on, any communication, any questions, any requests, no matter how small, must be made through my lawyer, Mr. Douglas Peterson. His contact number is attached to the divorce papers. Do not call me. Do not come to my workplace. I will not answer. I will not respond. You chose the path. I simply accepted your choice. Goodbye. Josh, I left the house without looking back. Every step away from that door felt like shedding weight I didn't know I'd been carrying. I went to the office and turned off my phone. I needed the silence to process the decade that had just evaporated like morning dew under harsh sunlight. Hours later, when I finally turned my phone back on, the voicemail started arriving in a flood. 37 messages. I watched the number climb, felt a grim satisfaction at her panic. The messages were hysterical, confused, terrified. She was calling, pleading, asking where I was. Josh, please, we can fix this. I made a mistake. I was confused. Don't throw away 10 years over one conversation. Pure panic dressed up as love. I deleted them all without listening to more than a few seconds of each. Her fate was no longer my responsibility. That realization was more liberating than I'd expected. The reason for her haste, her urgency to open the marriage, was revealed to me later through a private investigator I hired for the division of assets. The report came back thick with documentation, photos, timestamps. Dakota had been having lunch with Mark 3 times a week for 2 months. They'd been texting constantly, messages that started professional and gradually became intimate. The investigator even had a photo of them in Mark's car in the office parking garage, sitting too close, her hand on his arm. She'd been building toward this affair methodically, carefully, and the open relationship pitch was just her trying to buy moral indulgence for a betrayal that was already planned, already in motion. She wanted to avoid being the villain in her own story. A terrible mistake indeed, because now she was something worse than a villain. She was a coward. Life's irony soon took its toll on her, and I wish I could say I felt nothing when I heard about it, but the truth is, I felt vindicated. Dakota discovered in the most painful way possible that her lover was merely a freeloader, a married man with 3 kids who discarded her as soon as the situation with her divorce became real and complicated. The private investigator informed me that Mark had blocked her number, transferred to a different department to avoid her, and even filed a complaint with HR when she tried to confront him at work. He didn't want a divorced and troubled mistress hanging around, making demands, expecting him to leave his own wife. He only wanted a quick and discreet affair, a little excitement to spice up his boring middle-aged life. She was left alone, without a husband, without a lover, without even her dignity intact, because the office gossip mill made sure everyone knew exactly what had happened. She'd gambled everything on a fantasy and lost it all. Meanwhile, I was fighting for every fair penny, struggling to ensure the separation was quick and clean, free of sentimentality. But the battle wasn't just legal, it was psychological warfare. Dakota's lawyer tried every manipulation tactic in the book. They painted me as cold and unforgiving, suggested I was having a mental breakdown, even tried to claim I'd been emotionally abusive during the marriage. Each accusation felt like a knife in the back, but I refused to buckle. I sought individual therapy to deal with the anger and the feeling of stupidity for having been so blind for so long. Dr. Patterson's office became my sanctuary twice a week. The first session, I couldn't even speak for 10 minutes. I just sat there staring at the wall, feeling the weight of failure crushing my chest. When I finally opened my mouth, everything came pouring out in a torrent of rage and hurt and confusion. I gave her everything, I told Dr. Patterson, my hands clenched into fists. 10 years of loyalty, of coming home every night, of building a life together. And she threw it away for what? For some married scumbag who used her like a disposable toy? Dr. Patterson leaned forward. Josh, you're angry at her, but I sense you're also angry at yourself. That hit home harder than I expected. I should have seen it. The signs were there. She started dressing differently, working late, being secretive with her phone. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was being a jealous husband. I trusted her when I should have been paying attention. Trust isn't a weakness, Josh. What she did wasn't your fault. But it took months before I could believe that. Months of unpacking every moment of our marriage, every red flag I'd missed, every time I'd chosen to believe her lies because the truth was too painful. I was rebuilding myself piece by piece, learning to trust my own judgment again, learning that self-respect wasn't negotiable. Time passed. Months of cold and distant negotiations. Months of Dakota's lawyer sending passive-aggressive emails and settlement offers that were insulting in their audacity. She wanted half of everything, including my retirement account and the house that my parents had helped us buy. She wanted alimony despite having her own career. She wanted me to pay for the consequences of her choices. Doug fought back hard. We documented everything. The affair with Mark, her attempts to manipulate me, her complete disregard for our marriage vows. By the time we were done building our case, Dakota's position was indefensible. Finally, we meet at the final hearing. The courtroom was small, formal, and cold, with fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly sick. The air smelled like old wood and stale coffee. I sat impassive next to Doug, my hands folded on the table, my face a mask of calm. Inside, my heart was racing. This was it, the final ending, the official death certificate for what had been my entire adult life. Dakota entered, and I barely recognized her. She was looking thinner, almost gaunt, with red eyes and despair etched so deeply on her face that it looked like someone had carved it there with a knife. Her hair, once perfectly styled, hung limp and lifeless. She wore a black dress that looked too big on her frame. She'd lost weight, lost sleep, lost everything. Part of me, a very small part, felt a flicker of pity. Then I remembered her sitting across from me, asking for permission to betray me, and the pity evaporated. When the opportunity arose for her to speak, she ignored her lawyer's frantic signals and turned to me directly, her eyes filled with crocodile tears that I could see right through. Josh, please, she pleaded, her voice choked with emotion that might have been real or might have been performance. I couldn't tell anymore, and I didn't care. Please don't do this. We were a couple. We loved each other. Help me save our marriage. I made a mistake, but we can start over. I love you. I've always loved you. Mark meant nothing. It was just a stupid fantasy. Please, Josh, 10 years has to mean something. The silence in the room was deafening. Her lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. The judge's expression was carefully neutral, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes that suggested he'd heard this song before. I looked at Dakota, really looked at her, and for the first time in months, I felt only nothing. Anger had given way to indifference. Hurt had transformed into apathy. She was a stranger begging a stranger for something that no longer existed. The judge asked me if I had anything to say about my ex-wife's statement. I stood up, calm and composed. Your Excellency, I understand Dakota's plea, but she is mistaken. I turned directly to her. Dakota, the marriage is beyond saving because you destroyed it the moment the idea of betrayal became more appealing than our vow. My voice grew stronger. You said you loved me, but love demands respect and loyalty, and you offered neither. You tried to make me complicit in your dishonor. I turned to the judge. I won't believe anything good that might come from her. I'm no longer the man she married. That man was gone the night she asked me to be an open husband. And I added with certainty, divorce is the only path to my peace and my dignity. The judge banged the gavel. The divorce was finalized. Dakota cried in the living room, but I just signed the papers and left. There was no goodbye. There was no forgiveness. I went my own way, focused on rebuilding and therapy. Dakota had to live with the consequences of her choice. I lost a marriage, but I regained my integrity. And for me, the price was worth it. A year had passed since the judge banged the gavel, transforming the we into I. That first year of freedom after Dakota was strange, a mixture of grief and relief that left me feeling unmoored. Some days I woke up and forgot, for just a moment, that she was gone. I'd reach across the bed expecting to find her there, and the cold, empty sheets were a shock every time. Other days I woke up feeling lighter than I had in years, like someone had removed a weight from my chest I hadn't known I was carrying. I moved to a more practical apartment downtown, far from the ghosts of the suburban home. The new place was smaller, more modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows that let in too much light. It felt like living in a fishbowl at first. Everything was exposed, no corners to hide in, but eventually I came to appreciate it. The light felt cleansing somehow, like it was burning away the shadows of my past. I continued with individual therapy, and the process saved me in ways I couldn't fully articulate. The psychologist helped me understand that my anger wasn't just about the betrayal itself, but about the betrayal of my belief in what Dakota and I were. I'd built my entire adult identity around being a good husband, a loyal partner, a man who kept his promises. When she shattered that, she didn't just break my heart, she broke my understanding of who I was. You're grieving the loss of your own narrative, Dr. Patterson explained one session. You thought you knew the story of your life. She changed the ending without your permission, and now you have to figure out what the story really was. That resonated more than anything else had. I wasn't just mourning Dakota. I was mourning the version of Josh Miller who'd believed in simple things like trust and loyalty and happily ever after. Peace arrived slowly, replacing the fury. I was stable, rebuilt, but still carried the scar of loneliness. The future was an open horizon, but without a map. One autumn afternoon, I was at an art gallery at the invitation of a colleague who was worried I'd become too much of a hermit. The walls were covered with modern pieces that I pretended to understand, sipping wine that tasted expensive and feeling awkwardly out of place among the art crowd. I was standing there observing an abstract sculpture that looked like twisted metal but was supposedly about human connection when I felt a hesitant touch on my shoulder. The touch was light, almost apologetic, but it sent electricity down my spine. Josh? The voice was familiar in a way that made my chest ache with something I'd almost forgotten. I turned around slowly, afraid that if I moved too fast, the moment would shatter like glass. My heart skipped a beat it hadn't felt in over a decade. It was Nicole. Time collapsed in on itself. Suddenly I was 28 again, young and stupid and in love with a woman who painted sunsets and laughed at my terrible jokes. Nicole was my sweetest past, the last love before the great adventure and disaster that was Dakota. We had broken up amicably 11 years ago because our professional ambitions took us to different corners of the country, and our personalities, although compatible, were very different at the time. I was the man of rigid principles, the one who needed structure and rules. She was the artistic and free spirit who saw the world in colors I couldn't name. We'd loved each other fiercely, but we'd wanted different things from life. Or so we'd thought. Nicole, wow, the word came out breathless. You look fantastic. Time had been kind to her in ways it wasn't to most people. She was even more radiant than I remembered, with silver threading through her dark hair that somehow made her more beautiful, and that sparkle in her eyes that had always made me feel like I was the only person in the room. You too. You seem at peace, she replied, smiling shyly. But there was something in her eyes, a shadow that suggested she could see right through the facade I'd been carefully constructing for the past year. She always could read me better than anyone. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking. The conversation flowed effortlessly, as if time hadn't stood still. She was back in Connecticut, teaching art at a local school. She told me about her life, the challenges, the small joys. You and Dakota, she began hesitantly. It's over, I confirmed. My voice firm. A year ago, it was irreconcilable. As we were saying goodbye, she hesitated again. There was something in her gaze, a cloud hanging over her. Josh, I need to be honest with you. There's something I should have told you a long time ago. We went to a quiet cafe, one of those small places with exposed brick and mismatched furniture that felt intimate without being romantic. Nicole was visibly nervous, stirring the sugar in the coffee she wasn't drinking, the spoon clinking against the ceramic in a rhythm that spoke of pure anxiety. Her hands were shaking slightly. I encouraged her to talk, sensing that the ground was about to give way beneath me again, just when I'd thought I'd found solid footing. Do you remember when we broke up 11 years ago, that spring? Her voice was barely above a whisper. I replied with a smile, though something in her tone made it feel wrong. I remember. It was difficult, but necessary. The lie tasted bitter. It hadn't been necessary. It had been fear masquerading as practicality. She nodded slowly, her eyes filling with tears before she even said the words. Well, at that time, she paused, took a shuddering breath. At that time, I was pregnant. I was expecting your child. The world stopped. Just stopped. The cafe's sounds faded to white noise. The world, which I had just rebuilt on firm foundations, began to spin violently. I felt the blood drain from my face, my hands go cold and clammy. My vision tunneled until all I could see was Nicole's tear-stained face across from me. A daughter, a son, an 11-year-old secret, a child, my child, growing up without me, taking first steps I never saw, losing teeth I never collected, having birthdays I never attended. The weight of all those missing years crashed down on me like a physical thing. Pregnant! The word came out as a dry whisper, my throat constricted with emotion I couldn't name. Nicole, why didn't you ever tell me? Why? The question wasn't angry, it was devastated. How could you keep this from me for 11 years? Her eyes welled up with tears that spilled over and ran down her cheeks unchecked. Back then, you were so focused on your career, on making partner at the firm, and I was scared, terrified actually. I thought you'd run away, that you wouldn't take responsibility, that I'd ruin everything for you. We'd just broken up. You'd made it clear that your career came first, that you needed to focus. I was 26 and pregnant and alone, and I convinced myself that telling you would be selfish, would derail your entire life. She wiped at her face with the back of her hand. And then, she took a deep, shaking breath. Then, when I finally mustered the courage to look for you, months after Maya was born, after the sleepless nights and the fear and the loneliness, I found out you were already engaged to Dakota. I saw the announcement online. You looked so happy in that photo, so sure of your new life, like you'd moved on. Completely. I didn't want to be the ghost of the past that destroys the future. I thought I was doing the right thing. She picked up the phone and swiped the screen. That's her. The photo was of a beautiful 10-year-old girl with my brown eyes and Nicole's wide smile. Maya. The name echoed in my chest, the force of a revelation. It wasn't just an idea, it was a living, palpable, and beautiful reality. I didn't cry from sadness, but from overwhelming joy and a sharp pain for the time lost. She is perfect, Nicole. I looked at her seriously, my principled side resurfacing, but now tempered by love, and I replied, Nicole, you should have told me. No matter how scared I was at the time, Maya was our responsibility. It was wrong of you to keep that secret. You didn't have the right to make that decision for me. I would have taken responsibility. Always. Nicole shrank back, acknowledging her mistake. I know, Josh. I'm so sorry. I felt so sorry every day. But then I smiled, the first truly genuine smile in years. However, I'm not going to waste another minute grieving. I'm a father, Nicole, and nothing will be lacking for our daughter. I'm more than happy to know that I have a daughter. The reconnection was immediate and profound, almost frightening in its intensity. The 11-year barrier crumbled under the weight of unexpected fatherhood and a love that had never really died, just gone dormant. The love we had before, which had dissolved due to ambitions and fear and terrible timing, returned with a new maturity, now anchored by a purpose bigger than both of us. Maya. Nicole took me to meet Maya on a Saturday morning that felt both too soon and 10 years too late. I was terrified in a way I'd never been before, not even when Dakota dropped her bomb. This was different. This was pure, primal fear. How could I introduce myself to a child I didn't even know existed? What if she hated me for not being there? What if I said the wrong thing, did the wrong thing? What if she looked at me and saw nothing but a stranger who'd abandoned her? We met at a park, neutral territory. I saw her from a distance first, swinging alone on the swings, her dark hair flying behind her. My heart clenched so hard I thought it might stop. She had my eyes. Even from 50 feet away, I could see she had my eyes. "Maya, this is Josh, a special friend," Nicole said, her voice gentle, softening the blow, giving us both an out if this went badly. Maya, clever and curious, looked at me with an intensity that reminded me of looking in a mirror. She wasn't afraid. She studied me for a long moment, her head tilted slightly, and I could see her making calculations, drawing conclusions. In fact, there was a mutual understanding in that look, something wordless and powerful. I sat on the ground next to the swings, and she showed me her drawings of horses and stars, explaining each one in detail with the seriousness of a museum curator. Before long, I was laughing at her observations about how horses were basically just big dogs that people rode, and she was laughing at my terrible attempt to draw a horse that looked more like a deformed cat. Days later, after several more carefully supervised visits, Nicole gave me permission to tell her the truth. We sat in Nicole's living room, just the three of us, and I felt like I was about to jump off a cliff. "Maya," I said, kneeling before her so we were eye to eye. My voice shook slightly. "I am your father. I only found out now, but I am. And I am so, so happy to have you." The words felt inadequate, too small to contain what I was feeling. "I missed 10 years of your life, and I can't get that back. But I promise you, I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere ever again." Her reaction was one of childlike surprise, but not repulsion. Her eyes went wide, and then, without hesitation, she ran to hug me, her small arms wrapping around my neck with a fierceness that knocked the breath out of me. In that hug, 10 years of distance vanished, and I felt whole for the first time since I could remember. I held her and cried into her hair while she patted my back and said, "It's okay, Daddy. You're here now." Those 3 words broke me and rebuilt me simultaneously. I was whole finally. The Dakota disaster had taught me the value of integrity. Maya and Nicole taught me the value of unconditional love and family. Those first few weeks with Maya were a whirlwind of emotions I wasn't prepared for. Every moment with her was a reminder of what I'd missed and what I was gaining. She had her own little personality, fully formed without any input from me. She was obsessed with marine biology, could name dozens of sea creatures, and had strong opinions about which dolphins were the smartest. She liked her sandwiches cut diagonally, not straight across. She was left-handed like me. She hummed when she was concentrating, a habit that Nicole said drove her teachers crazy, but that I found endearing beyond words. One evening, about 3 weeks after I learned she existed, Maya asked me to help her with a school project about family trees. We were sitting at Nicole's kitchen table, papers and markers spread everywhere, and Maya was carefully drawing branches. "Where do I put you, Daddy?" she asked, and the casual use of Daddy still made my throat tighten every single time. "Mom says you're my dad, but you weren't there when I was born. Does that go on a different branch?" The question was innocent, purely logical, but it cut me deeper than any of Dakota's accusations ever had. I put down my marker and looked at her seriously. "You put me right here," I said, pointing to the spot next to Nicole. "I'm your father, Maya. I wasn't there for the first 10 years, and that's the biggest regret of my life. But I'm here now, and I'm going to be here for every single day from now on. Every birthday, every school play, every scraped knee, every bad dream. All of it." She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, that's good because I want you there. Some of my friends don't have dads at all, and they say it's sad." She went back to coloring, satisfied with my answer in the way only a child can be. I excused myself and went to the bathroom, where I stood with my hands braced on the sink and cried silently for 5 minutes. They were tears of grief for what I'd lost and joy for what I'd found, all mixed together until I couldn't tell the difference. I was happy, but the drama of the past still had one last act in store. Dakota, who was in a self-destructive cycle of trying to win me back through unanswered calls, ignored emails, and even showing up at my office building only to be turned away by security, discovered my new reality abruptly. A former coworker of hers, someone who'd never liked her much, saw me with Nicole and Maya at the park on a Sunday afternoon. We were having a picnic, and I was teaching Maya how to throw a frisbee, and we were laughing like we'd been a family for years instead of weeks. The coworker took a photo, posted it online with some caption about moving on fast, and of course, the news leaked directly to Dakota. She confronted me the next day in the lobby of my building, waiting there like a predator. She was pale and gaunt, like she hadn't been eating or sleeping, with the expression of a wounded lioness who'd stumbled into a trap. Her hair was disheveled, her clothes wrinkled. This wasn't the polished woman I'd married. This was someone who'd been hollowed out by consequences. You hypocrite! That's why, wasn't it?" she shouted, her voice shrill and breaking, drawing stares from everyone in the lobby. People stopped walking, pulled out phones, started recording. "That's why you asked for a divorce. You betrayed me with that woman, and used my request for an open relationship as an excuse to get rid of me. She's your affair, isn't she? Your daughter is proof of your betrayal. You were cheating on me our entire marriage, and you had the nerve to act like I was the villain." Her anger was proof of her denial, her complete inability to accept blame for anything. She needed a scapegoat for her failure, someone else to take the weight of her mistakes. The small crowd that had gathered was eating it up, watching our private tragedy like it was reality television. I stared at her, and my voice when it came out was so calm, so controlled, that it cut through her screaming more effectively than any shout could have. It was the voice of a man who'd moved beyond anger into something colder and more final. "Dakota, control yourself. You're not going to make a scene like that in my home." I kept my voice level, almost bored. "You owe me an explanation," she yelled hysterically, her face flushed red, spittle flying. "You owe me the truth." "I don't owe you anything, not anymore. But for the last time, because I want witnesses to hear this, so you can never twist it later, listen to the truth."